Okay, it being 2 minutes after 5, or 2 minutes after 6, March 21st, we'll bring this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. First thing, we don't have minutes from the last time because it was just last week. So we'll move on to our 2022-23 discussion of the budget, starting with curriculum and instruction.
And so the plan is to just go through this similar to what we did last week with transportation, facilities, and IT. Just going through the detail of the different accounts. I'll caveat, starting with special ed and pupil services, that when we go through the special ed budget, what we're doing is going through basically student by student with if there's placements for out of district. And so there's only so much detail that we can provide as far as going into, we're not going to say who the student is and how many students at whatever placement, but there are variations year to year through the budgetary process, depending on student successionalities and placements. So there are times where there's fluctuations in the budget as it pertains to special ed and pupil services with primarily placements, also some IU costs. So I just want to caveat that the beginning of the meeting, as far as there's only so much level of detail that we can provide because when it comes down to specific students.
I guess year over year, it won't be really apples to apples.
Gotcha. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, because it will depending on where the students are, who the students are. Students come in, come to the district, leave the district, so you can have pretty wild swings year to year in different account codes. So, for instance, you could have a student who may be is identified as emotional support, and then next year it could be a different identification, different sectionality, based on IEP. So you do have these changes that will impact where in the budget. So we may, if we start for this first line here, this is an IU cost. So we contract with the IU. This is part of the cost plan that we contract with them for services. And so you'll see we have a revised budget currently for the 21-22 school year of about $11,000. And it's projected then 22-23 to be 105. So you see this massive swing. And a lot of times this is then dependent on what students were budgeting for. Like I said, there's only so much detail that we can kind of go into with that. But Carol, Andrea, Dr. Roche, and myself went through this, and basically Carol's worked through this to identify where the students are, where they're currently placed, where we're anticipating having students placed. I know you can probably speak a little bit more to some of this stuff.
This line right here is really just, it's not something new, it's a change of program. So it would come from an APS to this line here.
So I would say when you're looking at the budget, anytime you see tuition or program, those are student placements universally. So the composition of the special ed budget reflects, almost all of that value is in programming.
Okay. Makes sense.
And then depending on, as Carol said, depending on their, the type of program. So life skills program, that means that's a placement that we have kids. And we don't make those decisions, the IEP teams make those decisions, so we don't even necessarily.
They are what they are.
Essentially they are.
Gotcha.
And it is broken down by that exceptionality. So when we're looking at transportation budget, which is all of, call it 20 line items, you're talking about your contracted service and your fuel primarily, this gets broken down to the specific exceptionality. So if it is emotional support, if it's autistic support, if it's a multiple disability, so there are a lot of account codes here. So as we go through it gets to be, when it's 12 pages, printed out, it's pretty intense, but it is detailed to the specific programming, because then we can always kind of look back and say, okay, how much did we spend on a certain exceptionality year over year, even though it's not always comparing apples to apples, because it's dependent on the students that we have in the district at that particular time.
Okay.
So as we work down, as Andrea had said, this is a tuition account. for life skills. So we're taking into account changes with placement, changes in the cost of the programming, and different students that we may or may not have placed year over year.
And one quick question.
Yeah.
While you're using this as the example, the 105 for that, your account code there is 1211.3, well, and then you have mobile codes underneath there. I thought I'd seen something change. Like we have the special ed life skills, and that pretty much takes up over half that bottom half of the page, continues on to the next page. And then, yeah, it goes from 1211 to 1221. Is that a different provider or a different type program?
It's a different exceptionality. So those are hearing impaired services.
Okay,
So it goes-
exceptionality is the, I'm trying to think of the correct way to say it, but the disability or
Programs.
program
The
staff
program,
you
yeah.
put into.
So
Okay,
is there codes for each of the 13? Okay.
I said, well, each of the types, so you'll see life skills, hearing impaired, speech and language, autistic support, emotional support, learning support. So those are all different. You know, that 1225, that's different.
yes.
That's speech and language.
But it's possible we could have multiple of the subcodes within
Yep.
there.
And then they're broken down secondary, elementary.
Yeah, I saw all those, yeah.
Just to make it further
Yeah.
confusing.
Yes, and then when they go
It's a
from
lot.
elementary to secondary, then there's another change.
Well, it's like going back to the 105 that Dan had used for the original one. I mean, the year before we had 11070, for that, and then it's 0 going to the next one, and that was the elementary, and this one is going into the secondary, carried into the secondary for this coming year, so with 105. Okay.
So as we kind of go through the special ed pupil services, it might be beneficial to use the pivot table that we were working on with transportation and facilities, because this will go through specific object codes, specific areas. So if we were to say, what is tuition as a whole, or what are supplies or books as a whole, opposed to breaking that down by exceptionality. It might be easier to see and compare this year over year. There's still differences depending on the programming, but based on the actual items that we're purchasing or the services that we're purchasing, this will go through that in a little bit more detail. So if I click in here, it's going to pull this over, so I have to just click on the side here and work down. So in a sense, where we're looking at books and periodicals for programming, it's relatively consistent. As we kind of go down this a bit more, general supplies is up a little bit, but that comes down to what a lot of times are different manipulatives in classrooms and things of that nature. You'll see that the bigger swings are other professional services. This comes down to any of the contracted services that we're using for particular students. So we do see an uptick in those services. This could be this is OTS or PTS for OT
GHR.
and PT. So those services that we contract out get coded to the other professional services for occupational therapy and physical therapy for the students. We've been using that quite a bit and with good results. So we're continuing with PTS. See in the green section here. So this is showing bigger changes based on red being a bigger expense, green being a lesser expense than the prior year, than our current budget. The big swing in other professional services. This is anything from basically any of the contracted educational services, or where OT, PT get factored into. They're non-instructional in nature. These are instructional costs that are contracted out. So, Carol, can you go into a little bit of
Yeah, on the green, right, that
Yeah.
line?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a lot of the IU cost, CCIU, the MCIU, its programs, its the explorations, Anderson's programs, things like that. So, and it's also like our hearing programs, so the related service, but it's also programming for some students. And then a lot of it has to do with the cost plan.
So that's I think the board, in the budget, we always ask the board to approve that cost plan. That's sort of a breakdown of all the students and the sort of the value that goes into that cell. And so we do have students in very unique and specific programs through IUs in and around Montgomery County. And then all of their services are encumbered in that. And then the IU also provides us service. So it's a high ticket line item, but that's some of our more complex learners who require a high degree of support.
Now, is this where we would also see things like our contract with them for access services, since that's typically our special ed population? Or would those contracts be in a different code?
So I don't know where the contract for access, what code truthfully lives in.
Yeah, that wouldn't.
That wouldn't be these
in
types
the-
of contracting
in the
services. This is
instructional
strictly
service.
direct to students services.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So we're working through other larger swings. It's tuition, $42,000 of a decrease in tuition projected currently based on student populations. But that, as we kind of continue through the year, that anything that happens from this point until the end of the year will be taking into account any changes with students that are in district, anybody who moves in, anybody who exits. We'll keep fine tuning this as we continue through the year, essentially because it could change. It basically, as soon as a new student comes in or somebody's identified as having a certain exceptionality, we're making changes to this as we kind of work through the budget.
And if I can just add in, so, the approved private schools are what an APS is. And so each of those placement categories has a specific, how we describe them. There are opportunities for the district to get what's called a 40-10, which is some level of reimbursement where they pay for some and we pay for a small amount. So there are some of those factors. I can tell you that one of the biggest unknowns for us coming into this year that would have blown the budget out was we got 8 foster students in the first 10 days of school, all of them in special education. 4 of them had to be placed out of district in high level placements. We would have never, they didn't live here. And so our foster placements are high, unlike we've ever seen, and we can't anticipate that they're coming, but we do have lots of foster families that reside in the district that kids get placed in.
Okay.
And so part of that as well, and I know we spoke about this at the last meeting with, as it pertained to IT and an E-rate, as far as we may have certain items that are qualified, and then we basically receive a deduction in those expenses. In a similar fashion, the 40-10, as far as what the cost is to the district, if we do get a slot that is eligible for a 40-10, it's a greatly reduced cost to the district. The trouble is, if you don't know what, if you're going to be qualified for or eligible for, or if the placement doesn't have that particular slot available, you're picking up the entire expense. So as we kind of move forward, it's a matter of what's the best practice as far as budgeting. Do you budget the gross amount when you don't know whether or not you're going to have this offset in expense from, essentially the additional subsidy? Or do you budget the net, assuming that you're going to get hope for the best? Unfortunately, if it doesn't come through, it's a real deal breaker when it comes down to the budget, and we won't have any say as far as whether or not you place that student or not. That student's going to that placement, and if we don't have the funds budgeted for it, we find ourselves in a tough situation. So normally we're budgeting for the gross amount. If we don't know whether or not we're going to be eligible, or we are going to have the ability to have 4010 available to the district, we'll budget the entire amount. Once we know that, if the slot is available, or we have a darn good idea, if we're almost positive, we might be moving in the other direction and then saying, okay, well, we're going to budget based on the net amount, assuming that we're going to have the 4010. But a lot of the times, we may not know that information until after we're presenting the budget, after we've already gone through everything. So it's similar to that IT side of it, where are you budgeting the gross, hoping for the best, or do you budget the conservative way because of that uncertainty? And essentially, you're going to have to provide the funds for that placement. And so if you don't have it in the budget, like I said, we're in a tough situation where we're overspending budget, and we're getting in trouble from the state for overspending and not having that built into the budget. So just wanted to kind of walk through that as well, because it's the idea is to make sure that we have essentially the funds available if we don't end up having the additional state subsidy.
Just a quick question
Yeah.
about the 4010 again. That's a cost savings to us, but is there like a matrix that you have to hit in order to get that savings? Or is it just the luck of the draw that, hey, we've got
Or is it
X number of students and we're going to give X number, Y number of slots with
So it
4010?
I would say it depends. So we use certain programs. There's one program at APS, knock on wood, every time we've used the program, we've gotten the 4010. There are other programs, APSs we use, we could wait 10 years to get a 4010. So it depends on their numbers, what they're provided, I guess, from the state as well. So,
what they can offer.
Okay.
yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, so it's a moving target. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, and I think that's the real stressor is, okay, it is a budget. It's based on the best information that we have at the given time. So as like I said earlier, as we move through the months, as we get closer, if anything changes, we're definitely reassessing the budget and making adjustments to it. And that's why, based on our budget timeline and the approval timeline, it's going all the way out to June, basically the last time, so we have basically as much time as possible to get as much information as needed to basically get as accurate as we can. Pass the budget today, but if anything happens tomorrow, then we're stuck. So as we kind of go through, we're continuously having those conversations and making adjustments.
Okay. Anyone have any questions?
Yep. We've already had kindergarten registration, correct?
Correct. It's sort of open and rolling.
But I'm assuming we already know how many we have coming in from
Yeah.
early intervention, correct? How's it looking? Are we looking at an increase, decrease?
So I will say honestly, as much as we hold the transition meetings, December, January, February, with every potential EI student that could enter a school age. However, and this year in particular, there are a number of families that could come that also have the option to remain a year. And there are a number of them potentially that are thinking about remaining in EI for another year. So for us to say these potential costs based on these programs, it's difficult because they're not registered, a number of them. I think we probably have maybe 10 or 11 families that have registered out of, I'm going to say, we're from EI, and that does include speech onlys,
Right.
in the mid-30s.
Okay.
So it's hard to determine if somebody would need an AS program or an out-of-district program until we get the registration, and then we would complete a reevaluation. So then because a number of students come as, at EI, it's called DD, or developmental delay, which is not a school-age disability. So our job is do they continue to qualify or do they not? And so it's difficult to say these costs at this point.
So that's another moving target. So we have this population of kids who are eligible to come to kindergarten,
Right.
but families have the choice until whenever they decide whether they come or not.
Right.
And we can't do anything until they decide to come.
Right.
So we're making the best judgment about what type of program and then assigning dollars to it. But 10 kids could stay in early intervention.
Right.
Now, when you say decide to come, does that mean actually come in the fall or come the
Register.
following year?
No, register, and
Register.
then
For this
the
coming
plan is to
year.
enter in September.
So it's a little bit of a
So their other alternative is to keep them in preschool or?
Yeah,
Okay.
in their early
Just
intervention programming,
thorough
whatever the
for-
families
yeah. Okay.
choose. And so, and we can't force them.
No, there's no
really
end date.
in one
Yeah,
year.
and we have a potential list of our EI students that could enter, but literally until they register,
You don't.
and they may not register until August 1st, or they may not at all. And then we're looking, we have to provide it day one, and they currently have services, but it's,
But we also have to conduct an evaluation for school age services, which we have up to 60 days to do. So some, if they decide late, then we're still making,
In October.
we're still,
Yeah.
right. So it's a little difficult to say, yep, that's exactly what
We're
the
gonna have.
program's going to look like.
Okay.
That's the tricky part with, with special ed services, is that as we kind of go through it, I know we've discussed this at length in other meetings, is that there are a lot of unknowns. And so it's a matter of best judgment for some of these expenses, and you don't want to come up short. So when we move through it, it's a matter of using best judgment, but also it does require taking a conservative approach to make sure that we do have funds available to make sure that the students are getting all of the services that they need. So that just want to make sure that as we kind of go through, I know we talked about special ed, and I think it's a different meeting, and where there are some times where we come to the end of the year, okay, was there a surplus in your special ed? There may have been. The issue would be if there was a deficit in your special ed, then that means that kids aren't getting the services that they legally need to. And so we put ourselves in a really difficult situation and litigious situation when it comes down to not having provided those. So when we're taking a conservative approach, it isn't just for the sake of being conservative and having, quote unquote, padding in the budget. It's to make sure that we can provide the services.
So if we run out of budget money, we don't provide the services?
No, we have to.
We have to.
That's what I'm saying. Well, okay.
Yeah.
So what
But when you said that, I'm like, wait.
Okay, we're budgeting this,
The
so
cost
we can
of
save money.
litigation would exceed the cost of the
Oh,
program.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, if you were to come up short on the budget in a special ed area,
You'd find a curriculum.
you'd have to find it somewhere else. You'd probably take it out of curriculum.
I like that.
Athletic fields
Yeah,
Jim's not here. It's technology.
So you start having to, rob Peter to pay Paul.
Mhm.
And again, then other areas
Oh.
sacrifice to make sure that you're covering what you need to.
It was just the way you said it.
Yeah,
I'm just waiting.
No.
That's not gonna
It's just like your
work. I'm
household
like, whoever's watching,
You get that
that's
unexpected car repair, so you take it out.
Gotta pay
Yeah.
from somewhere. Yeah. Okay, exactly.
So, yes.
All right. Any other questions?
No, thanks.
Okay, no? Good. All right.
We can move
What's
over.
that bottom number?
So overall, yeah, that bottom number is more attractive
That's it,
in the
not you.
current budget than it is, this year. So this is actually projecting $443,000 less in the special ed and pupil services budget.
On March 21st.
Yeah, currently as it's.
on March 21st.
Right this minute.
And kids do graduate from the district at 21, so sometimes with them is the cost of the program, which
Sure.
can also yield some.
Yes. Okay.
So the curriculum and instruction budget is not 12 pages long.
Yes.
So
But it's
Maybe.
more
But
money.
we've had the
we
money.
may be.
It's more money. No, just kidding. But
We
you
may
make
be
up
able to
for
walk through
it.
that the same way that we did last meeting and kind of go account by account, because it's not going to be, like I said, 440 rows of information. So as we're walking through the curriculum instruction budget, you see there are some instances where certain line items don't line up perfectly. And that may be, I can show one example here in the 1110-650 account. So we had budgeted this split 50-50, or it's been since adjusted. This is the revised budget. The original budget was split 50-50, just took what what Kim had worked on, said, here's the budget, okay, it's going to be 50% elementary, 50% secondary, from the budgetary side. When it comes down to it, the spending doesn't happen 50-50. There's different needs in different levels of the schools. And so when you're looking across here, it looks like there's zero. Kim doesn't need any money
Yes.
in those accounts. And you're right, that's not true. It's currently
all in
up
there.
here in this district-wide, so rather than it being broken down, in elementary and secondary, currently it's just in a single account. We can end up going down and breaking this out as we kind of go forward and have it more specific. But when it really comes down to it, from the state's perspective, we break it down based on it'll be broken down on the spending, so when we actually purchase items, we code them to the elementary or the secondary accounts. But for the budgetary purposes, this keeps pretty much wide open to say this is tech-related supplies for your curriculum instruction. It's $540,000.
So the 125 is what we're asking for in elementary books, so that's part of curriculum review. The 225 is what we're asking for in terms of secondary books. That's based on the curriculum review cycle and who we have up for writing at any given time. So based on that, that's about what we expect to pay for new resources. The 540, you see that very large jump, is directly related to UPOLA. It's the cost for Edgenuity for all of the students that we have in UPOLA right now, as well as the very small number that we have in MVP K-5. But that still packs a little punch with the cost for that. So just to give some context for that, because it's like, Kim, what are you doing there? That's directly related to the number of kids we have in UPOLA.
It's not add and multiply.
Right. That's what I leave up to Dan.
So speaking of that, what is our plan for virtual instruction for next year? I mean, we've always had that as an option at the high school, for credit recovery and such, but it was a new thing at our lower levels. Are we going to be continuing that, or are we phasing that out?
Well, we're talking about it. We have a meeting scheduled in the upcoming weeks. We really want to be responsive to students and their needs, but we also know, based on what we've seen in the pandemic, kids learn much better
Right.
face-to-face in buildings. And so that's as much as I'll say. I don't know if Andrew, you're...
No, I was going to chime in, like, this is a hot topic, for, at
Yeah.
least for us, to frame that out and really know what we can do, and can we do it well, versus we were, as you guys know, the world of COVID was just choice, just figure it out. And then we were like letting everyone have their say, convenience versus safety, and that a lot of has kind of gone away. And we've definitely seen an explosion there in the secondary level, which is no surprise, more so at the high school, based upon choice and decisions. And the elementary remain very stable and manageable in terms of that piece. But secondary-wise is something we've got to take a look at. So I think there's going to be some discussions, as Kim said, and probably even tomorrow with the principals, just really trying to figure out what that looks like, because we can't sustain what we're doing
Right.
financially. I don't know if you've seen it, you probably did in the update we talked about, the ESSER breakouts. There was something in there that said like a TOSA, as a teacher on special assignment. That was at least a thought, to have someone for a year or two, a year at least initially, to focus solely, to be a teacher on special assignment that would focus really on those cyber kids, those UPOLA kids, and really try to get a handle on that, because we know we have 115 and now we're at 190. There's a lot of dollars out in that sense from that. Can we recoup any of those students and or help manage what's going on? So to answer your question, we don't have a full plan laid out. It's definitely something in discussions, and for some change is hard. And some would say, let's all go back in person. That's the only option. But then you're opening up the opportunity that anyone that wants that any flexibility will just go and they grab the dollars with them.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen those.
Yep.
Versus is it going back to, like I said, the high school program had a program, and then we've also seen through the course of the year people just simply migrating, which all of a sudden that's what came, I think, shutters, and you start seeing costs being added on, which weren't even planned from the beginning. The program just grew.
Now, the teacher on special assignment, would that person be developing like a program and everything to do it, or are they actually out there still currently teaching a small group of people, or different individuals at different times?
Again, I still have to frame that out. That was just put into the ESSER as a potential. They would not be teaching, they would be on an assignment, which would be focusing solely on getting a good handle on those the ingenuity piece of that, the actual cyber piece. I mean, we sat at a finance meeting a couple months ago, and we talked about the number of dollars that were out there. So really having someone focus on that and seeing those needs and seeing what we can, if we can get anything to come back in. So it's just an attempt to really put a focus on this big, I mean, we're talking over $2 million if you add up what's currently there and then what was added to that. And an investment in ESSER dollars to see if we can recoup some of that. And, you know, if they recoup like 5 kids, that money's covered out of that almost 200 that are 100 and something that are in cyber, and then the handle on the UPOL, for lack of a better term. You remember UPOL first started as what, it was only K to 5.
Yep.
And then we went to the next, this past year we went, instead of coming up with a new set of initials, we just kind of encompassed, shifted the program at the high school down to the elementary, down to the middle, and then encompass it all there. But the choice there is it's a lot. You have all these things here, and then these guys will tell you specifically, some of our students with special needs, we can't meet them. We can't, the case managers, we can't meet all those things. So one thing on the table would be to simply get everyone back in and have some flexibility at the high school with some provisions in terms of what it was used for before, right? It was used for unique circumstances or
Credit
schedules
recovery.
there were credit card, but also it was schedules that couldn't fit. They were singletons, or we had an exceptionality of someone that was out doing something in the community and they still needed to get their courses. I'm not sure how well that would be received, but maybe back, I hate to use the word survey and or collecting some feedback as we head into the part here for that.
Okay.
But currently, the way you have it budgeted, you are planning for a virtual program of some sort.
The other dollar amounts that are encompassed in that are some of the things we looked at 2 months ago at Curriculum and Instruction when we showed you things like Pear Deck and Educate. So all of those things, Schoology, Seesaw, I was looking at a couple of them, Lexia, so Cami Wiser, all of those digital tech tools that we've kind of vetted. When we got them all for free, we figured out what we wanted to pay for. So we vetted those, and that is also lumped into that cost. They would fall under those tech supplies, services, and fees.
Okay.
So it's not just cyber, because it's a really big number. It's a lot of those digital content and platforms that we use every day in the classroom.
Yeah, any of the IT software costs that pertain to curriculum instruction ends up going in that account.
That's why you take extra from Jim, because he put everything in my mind.
That's it,
Twice
yeah.
now, we're just gonna.
Just looks like he's not spending as much there.
That's right, it's over here.
Okay. So that's the worst one?
That is the worst one, yeah, we can
Okay.
breathe again, the rest is easy.
Just checking. Gotcha.
And so,
Just some opportunity, like the smaller numbers that you see there, you can look across, you'll see district supplies, you'll see professional development for coaches, Sarah, me for bringing some people in. You'll see meals for induction, some other tech fees and supplies. I think that is for the platform that we track our professional development in. I think that's Oasis, my learning plan, Frontline, whatever we call it now.
This year's name?
Yeah, this year's name. The 1250s are basically for professional organizations that we belong to.
Okay.
And then the 49 split, that chunk in half there, is representative of professional development. So we do have some set aside in ESSER that we hope to be able to use ESSER funds for. This would be, if we weren't able to do that or if there was additional PD needed, we have some in the budget here. We've really been utilizing very heavily Montgomery County Intermediate Unit for early literacy learning. We had Amber Malloy and Sarah Meisner in on Friday to work with our K-3 population of teachers and as well with our reading specialists and instructional coaches to build some capacity there. The other big cost for professional development is TLS. It's our group that's been working all year long with 4th through 12th grade. Had a request from both Chris and Rob, middle school and high school, to not work in cohorts, but try to get every teacher trained. It is very difficult to plan PD when you have 14 going here and to talk about all the great things that are happening when only 14 are getting that PD. It's a really great model because it keeps class size small and it allows for coaching. But when I counted basically what was left of core area teachers, it's about 28 and 26 in middle school and high school. So I'm trying to work with them to see if they'll take 2 cohorts at the same time next year. I don't know if if they can handle it in terms of capacity with the number of trainers that they have and the number of days that we have, because we're always not fighting for days, but trying to share what PD days we have competing. So that would be representative of the cost for MCIU and anything else we might need in terms of PD. And then travel, and I don't know what that 1,500 is there. Oh, that's PD is BIU if we were to go and get some, or for paraprofessionals or other people for training.
Okay.
So that was painless, except for that one line.
So as far as,
One line, is that the
That
bottom
one
line?
line. One
The
line.
bottom line?
not this one.
I blame
this
Dan.
one.
It's about
You can blame me.
300.
You can absolutely blame me. So as Kim said, I guess really the curriculum review and the books that are going to come out of that as far as the texts for different coursework. I forget. what you said.
Curriculum review?
Yeah, but
Curriculum review
what's-
cycle?
Yeah, but what's up? It's-
Next year is science.
Okay.
And science is integrating to next generation science standards, so it will need new resources, without a doubt. And lots of pain.
For everybody.
Lots of work, not pain, work.
Painful work.
Fun and
Yeah.
work.
Okay.
So just seeing this as a different, in a different light, that's the books. This is the combination of the software and cyber. And then overall, where you saw special ed and pupil services as a decrease, Kim couldn't help herself. And so it is up from the prior year, but a lot of that, it does come down to the curriculum review and also the increased costs in what we may be offering as far as a cyber virtual program.
Okay. All right. Well, again, if we bring them back and spending all those dollars on other schools,
It's that
I'm
balance.
okay with that.
Yeah, it's a balancing act too, because depending on, you don't know what the alternative is in a sense, and so whatever we're doing from a virtual side does have an impact on, do those students come back or do they go to a charter school? And so that unknown is kind of a tough thing to
Well,
deal
we know
with.
we had an increase in people leaving because of masks or no masks,
Right.
or, whatever the pieces that are there. And some.
Is there ever a time when you will know that, whether they're coming back or not coming back? Now, I mean, starting freshman
Students or
year.
masks?
No, no, the kids, the kids, the ones
Yeah,
that
and
left.
part of that will be this next discussion in terms of gauging what people want to do. But again, I think the time, last year, about a year ago when we did this, we got a very low percentage, just even response rate
Yeah.
back. It was less than 30% from whatever, from that information that we asked for.
Have you seen any students come back since they gave up the mask mandate? Have we seen any kids coming back in the past month or
There's
so?
been a couple of Ebola kids that have come back, yes.
Mhm.
I've seen that.
That's good.
Because I know we had a number that left because of masking.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
To my knowledge, we haven't any who left once it became optional.
That's
Yeah, there
good.
was discussion of one, but I don't think it
Yeah.
went.
Okay.
I think the trajectory was so steep
Yeah.
that before you could think about it, you saw it
Mhm.
everywhere.
Yep. Yeah, true. True.
It still
Okay.
changes daily.
Yeah, it does. True. Okay.
Well, that's encouraging, just from seeing everything that you've just presented on these two, we're relatively about the same as what we had budgeted for last year, or
We're still a little to the good.
little, yeah. I'm not gonna say
Hold your
anything
praise
for
for
that.
that.
We haven't deviated that much,
I didn't say
Knock on
anything
wood
out loud, I
somewhere.
promise. Yeah.
but, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So what's next?
So
Or what
Next.
else haven't you told us?
Next is the really ugly subject of new staffing.
the ugly subject.
We didn't get that paper.
Yeah.
That's because it's gonna have to not.
So there goes those savings.
Yep. And then some.
So at the February 22nd meeting, we kind of went through salaries and what it currently looks like. That was, at that point in time, I'll caveat it with that, it was not based on it was based on the matrix for the professional group staying exactly the same, which with negotiations, you know, is going to be up in the air. So at that time, when we went through salary went through that we were discussing different positions, different needs for the district, and that Dr. Roach basically had a listing that we were prioritizing staff needs, and kind of paring that down as we move forward. So
Dan, the right number to mark from today, that's the ones and twos?
this is the ones and twos.
Okay.
Yep. So at that point, based on salaries, the impact for mainly payroll taxes, PSERS, and benefits, that was about 1.08 million in total. So we worked through that. Dr. Roach has been going through and basically working with the team to prioritize what those needs were based on all the feedback that we've been providing. And so currently taking, as you referred to, as ones and twos in Dr. Roach, I don't know, schematic of importance.
Highly scientific.
What do we want to call it?
Highly scientific.
Yes. We've come down to, we brought that down to salaries of $377,000, and then the impact for payroll, retirement, and benefits. So essentially trying to pare that down into what was really needed, opposed to there's a wish list, and then what we can pare that down to, and then if that wish list were to, that then becomes a multi-year process as we move forward next year, the following year. If those needs change, we can kind of keep reassessing the situation and prioritizing those different positions. So essentially bringing that down 444,000 from that initial over $1 million down to the 640,000 that it is as of today.
So I'll update a little bit, just be cautious about what I'm saying, because I don't want people to listen to it and then say, oh, we thought we were getting this, and then you get nothing. I mean, that's how this happens. And one or two of these are actually tied to specific people, so I'll be very hesitant to talk about that, but I'll try to talk about it basically. As Dan said, try to show the board in terms of a projection over a course of years, and not just every year it's all of a sudden something new. You'll see it, and it's a need. So the ones and twos, and there's threes and fours as well. The ones specifically are tied to some of the things, or they're just specifically tied to needs that are established, and we need help in these areas. So those are area gifted, elementary gifted, elementary student assistance counselor, and then DCBAs for student supports. Now that item is also dual accounted for in ESSER. So that's some conversation we have to have. And all of these things are not necessarily all new dollars. If we can, this year doesn't seem like it's the year with not as many retirements and not the ability to go down that road, but every job will be considered for that. So those first ones are in the pupil services areas of firming up program shifts and changes and making sure that we're doing what's right for all kids there. I think scientifically, I wrote documented need, must have for compliance, reoccurring deficiencies, program stabilization. They're really needed. Those are those quote ones that the three I just shared with you. One of those two BCBAs, and it's again still up for discussion. The twos themselves, one was a coach to support the PD. That really happened this year, as Mrs. Bass said. We kind of got a whole school through there to support that coaching, and she's been developing that with the Discovery and the K and building out the K-3s. This would kind of add on to that moving
This is
forward.
the TLS, right?
Yeah, it would be a coach there to support that. And I think you guys are still trying to creatively look at that. And then there's a need that requested from Mrs. Fisher in HR for some admin support there beyond the one person she has with all the things that are going on in HR. It's a lot. And then there's two other positions, the ones I'm trying not to talk about specifically, with two current employees to expand duties as well as time for them. Then there are threes, which are just as important, but they just didn't quite reach that as you try to prioritize things. Again, I think there will be another coach, some additional help. It's a three, it's a request for kindergarten teachers to reduce class size, but we don't know the full number of kindergarten teachers yet, so it's not quite there yet, but we would keep monitoring that. And then another And then some potential expansion in the area of communications or the Ed Foundation and some other areas probably on my side of things. But, so those are the without giving up too much, that's pretty much what's there. I'm happy to share what I have here in exec as we get more into conversations in terms of those specific positions, and we have to still flesh that out a little bit. But there's already requests for next year on this list, people that are like thinking ahead to say, okay, this is something I can see coming down the pike. And as I always use the example of the technology network engineer that was on our first list and then got pushed, and that's how it happens. It happens over time sometimes. So that's, if there's any questions or, again, try to
So
be
is
vague,
that
but
precedence that we're going to make them push for like 2 to 3 years?
not always,
Yeah.
not always. But, sometimes, again, that's when you prioritize, you say, okay, we've had that for a while, and,
Yes.
could also get creative and say, one of these things depending upon, if not in with kids, but something else, maybe something can come in mid-year, so it's not as much next year, if it was an
Right, like maybe there's a seasonal time technically or something like that.
Or you just say, okay, we can only afford half of that right now, but we need to commit to it moving forward, So I know we have to still fine tune the SRPs, and if we can, through attrition, shift some dollars, that's preferred, for that. So,
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'd like to hear more about them and exactly when we get to that point.
yep.
Okay. Questions?
No, I'm good with this.
Okay.
No, it's not, the only comment I have, it's nice to have you planning out for a number of years and seeing, estimating what you think your needs will be.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, especially if we have some right now, ESSER, but then we know we won't have it going forward,
If
so.
that's, that's a dangerous one-time money using it, you have to commit to it. Maybe if you're saying, we're gonna commit to it now through this avenue, but next year, that's
It's all on us.
priority zero, that has to happen
Right.
to do that,
Yep.
I mean, and some of the contracted services, and Andrea can tell you more about, our lakeside counselors, that's been supported through ESSER. If that goes, that we know that goes,
Right,
you know.
right,
And
which
it's
is
where
why
that
it's a
has to be moving
contracted
through.
service to
Right,
begin with.
right, yeah.
Did you say how many positions you're talking about? That would at least give me an idea.
In the ones and twos, that's on
Yes,
there?
yes, yes. Just to get an idea.
6 and 2 adjustments.
Okay, all right. Okay. And that was adjusted duties and
Yep,
time.
duties, responsibility, and time.
Okay. All right, thanks. That helps. Okay. If I can remember what my notes say.
I would prefer to get through this, Dan's presentation on Thursday,
Mhm.
get some direction, because we're still waiting, I don't know what you're doing now, if you're sharing anything or any numbers or anything.
Wasn't planning on.
That's fine, so I'm saying on Thursday, I know we talked today a little bit about making sure that we have a good picture, and that we're bringing everyone that's not attending these meetings up to speed
Right,
on Thursday, so that we have that mapped out, and then after that, once we have a number, we know we've got to start to pinch or expand. Then we can,
he's such a jokester.
then we can take a look and have an exec there in, what month is it, April?
Okay,
One of those,
all right,
as we see what's realistic.
okay,
All right?
all right.
Thank you.
So that's pretty much the rundown as far as special ed pupil services and curriculum instruction, and then the staffing piece. So that's pretty much what I had planned. I don't know if there were any other questions that kind of popped into anybody's head as we were continuing to go through.
Mhm. They're not cut and dried, and we get that. We get it. I think we get it.
So your plan on Thursday is to present those more condensed PowerPoint
Currently,
slides.
the plan on
correct?
Thursday is to have a more comprehensive presentation on where the budget is overall, both on the revenue side and the expenditure side. I know we haven't talked about the revenues specifically in the committee format, but my plan is to basically present where we currently stand overall budget-wise for 22-23 and provide as much of that detailed information as we have. It'll be more of an overview opposed. We're not going to go line by line like we can do in the committee format. But the goal would be to say, okay, here are the areas that we're seeing major changes as far as either increases or decreases, and the projected surplus or deficit that we are currently projecting on the 22-23 budget. Because that's then going to dictate then more conversations on the revenue side. I know we haven't gone through all the expenditures in the committee yet, but we have those on the agenda to
It's a
kind of go
process.
through as we move forward. But at this point, it's time to kind of put it out there as far as where everything stands, big picture, and what the expectations are as they will stand as of March 24th. So caveating everything with, it is all subject to change as we move forward, just because there's nothing, it's really tough to nail down all these moving targets. And it's not, we're talking about, curriculum instruction and special ed currently, but we still have moving targets in the, in transportation with fuel costs. We have moving targets with, when we talked about facilities and whether or not those expenses are going to be inside, in the operating budget, if they're going to be capital in nature. So all of those are going to come into play. At this point, it'll be basically taking what we've presented here in these individual departments, buildings, and the other departments we haven't gotten to yet, putting those all together, and then along with the staffing conversations that we've had. At this point, these salaries, and benefits for these additional staff will be built into Thursday's presentation as it stands for the March 21st. We've already pared that down from the February 22nd. I'll build in the March 21st amounts, and we'll go from where that stands and where that lands as far as use of fund balance, what it looks like from a revenue side, from a tax side, and we'll go from there.
Have you thought of it yet? I have to ask, have you thought of it yet?
No,
No.
I don't have any.
All right. It's sort of like going to be my question.
It's a fair
New
question.
Breslin.
It's my new Breslin,
Yes,
yeah.
I was just about to say that.
It's my
She
new
was in the
Breslin.
construction
Sorry.
project anyway.
It's my new Breslin.
At the next meeting, there is going to be a Breslin invoice, so.
Oh,
I look forward to the question. Yeah.
So I won't bring the champagne again?
No, I mean, you can still bring it, but we're probably not going to be able to crack it open.
Okay, I won't chill it. I'll just hang on to it. Okay, anyone else have any questions? No, you good?
For now.
Okay, good for
Till
now.
Thursday.
Okay, all right, well, thank you all very much for everything. And yes, motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, and again, thank you, everyone. I appreciate everything.
Yes, thank you.
None of this is easy. We get it.